How you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiega, here today on a Thursday, November 21st, to start Week 12 here in the NFL. We got an AFC North matchup on today's schedule. The Steelers taking on the Browns in the only game on tonight, obviously. Two teams going in very different directions, but it doesn't take away the importance of this game and just how close it actually is going to be. So we're going to break that down for you guys. Also, it's Thursday, so we're going to get into the game picks for Week 12, Part 1 today, and then Part 1 tomorrow, finishing off the week. And some more topics. What Micah Parsons lately said about the Dallas Cowboys is sure gonna bring a lot of attention to what he said, and also we're looking at the matchup a little bit ahead of time between the Chargers and the Baltimore Ravens, among the many things we're going to talk about on today's show. So make sure to stick around. But before we do get started on the preview to Thursday Night Football, I'd like to remind you guys, if you have any questions, comments, or any opinions you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to do so. Your input and interaction is always a big part of what makes this show great and what keeps the show, feeling, a bit different, and getting your guys' input of anything that we say or any of the topics on today's schedule. So if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that. Just use the new Super Chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. In this way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. And we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we always appreciate it whenever you guys are able to do that. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button and get involved with the show today. Again, hit the Super Chat button and share whatever you have on your mind. It's going to be a good week this week. There's a lot of good matchups coming up. A lot of testing games where we're really going to find a lot about a lot of these teams, and we're going to get to that a little bit later on. But in the first subject we have on today's schedule, we're looking at the AFC North matchup that we have between the Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. Everyone's calling it a trap game. Everyone's thinking that this is the perfect opportunity, right, for the Browns to host the Steelers on Thursday Night Football and play spoiler, basically, right? Because looking at the records, looking at, just how both teams have played, there's really no business why the Browns should be in this game. But I'm here to tell you that it hasn't always gone great for the Steelers on Thursday Night Football, especially on the road so far, especially on a short week as well. For both of these two teams, they play once again tonight, and we get another AFC North battle after the Steelers lastly defeated the Baltimore Ravens, bringing their record to 8-2, and the Browns enter this game. They host the Steelers tonight after their latest loss to the New Orleans Saints that dropped their record to the opposite of what Pittsburgh is at 2-8. Both of these teams have a win over Baltimore in the division, which is pretty neat, but also Cleveland has lost its last two games since that, and Pittsburgh continues its winning streak at 5 games now. Russell Wilson is 4-0 since taking over the job as the starting quarterback. The Steelers are on a 5-game win streak heading into this game, and some interesting pieces of news around this matchup. There's a lot of just little tidbits that I had no idea about. One of them being, it's the first time ever Jameis Winston plays the Pittsburgh Steelers. And also, not only that, it's the first time Jameis Winston plays in below 40-degree weather, oddly enough. Talk about weird and just true facts, right? Winston's never played in a game under 40 degrees, right? Going back to his time at Florida State with the Buccaneers and everything like that. You would imagine that at some point he would have found a cold environment, right? But that's not the case. Tonight's going to be his first time doing that. Also, looking at this matchup, Cleveland has won 8 straight home games on Thursday Night Football. Two in the past 5 years have been against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Steelers' record on Thursday night is not so pleasant. It's one of the things that could be, a blemish on Mike Tomlin's record. For whatever reason, the Thursday night games in the division, especially playing in Cleveland, have not been great for the Steelers overall. The last time the Steelers won in Cleveland actually was on October 31st in 2021. So it's been a few years now since the Steelers had success going to Cleveland. So it's going to be a hostile environment. That's what I expect. The weather's going to be pretty bad, or not ideal, considering what you consider ideal, right? It's going to be pretty snowy. I think the wind's going to be around 15 miles an hour or so, something around that. And it's going to be cold, so it's going to be ugly. I'm assuming like low-scoring defensive game, like most of these AFC North matchups are. So that's kind of the overview of this matchup tonight. We have two great defenses, also led by two Defensive Player of the Year candidates year in and year out, TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. I'm sure they're going to make their impact in this game at some point in time. And now looking at one of them, and looking at one of these teams, the Pittsburgh Steelers, looking at them, Alex Highsmith, one of their premier pass rushers, is not quite ready to go in tonight's game. He's been ruled out for tonight, so it'll be Nick Herbig starting on the opposite side of TJ Watt once again. He played a big role last week. He's looking to do the same this time around. And for the first time also, looking at the latest games, back to that Ravens game for the Steelers, Russell Wilson, that was his first time he had not thrown a touchdown for Pittsburgh since he took over. Before that, it was 3 touchdowns against the Commanders, a couple against the Giants. I'm pretty sure he threw 1 against the Jets as well. So it's one of the biggest letdowns, I guess you could say, for lack of a better terms, for Russ in his time as the starter. He's only played about 4 games, but the way it started, I think that's raised everybody's expectations. But the red zone efficiency is obviously a problem that the Steelers have to address. I mean, I say that, but I've been thinking about it all day, and the idea about the red zone efficiency, obviously it's a problem, but Russ has played 4 games. He's basically, been injured the entire time, and I'm not trying to justify them being 0 for 4, right, in the red zone, but, it's been like 1 game. And then I don't want to get too carried away about everything else that they've been saying, but that's been one thing that, I kind of picked out that, it is bad, but I feel like they're only going to get better from it. Does that include Justin Fields? Maybe they could try that. They tried it last week, not in the red zone, but just trying to convert on the last drive there against the Ravens. So we'll see if they bring that back out tonight. But it's something that is a worry, but let's not start freaking out about it at this point in time. Also, a win also tonight would guarantee Mike Tomlin's 17th straight year without a losing season if they win tonight. So it's also pretty interesting too, because the Steelers, I believe, at the beginning of the season were set at about 8.5 wins, and they could also break that tonight if anybody out there happened to bet on them or anything like that. That's also something they could accomplish tonight. And looking at the other side of things, the Cleveland Browns, they traded away Zadarius Smith, so that defense definitely lost a big, impact player for that side of the ball. And on that note, even with Zadarius Smith there, I feel like this defense hasn't been usually this year where I would have expected them to. Last year, just as a comparison, I felt like they were a lot more dominant, or I heard their name pop up a lot more. And this year, they're allowing 25 points per game and 132 rushing yards per game as well. So it's not really screaming out that they're as dominant, but they definitely have a lot of impact players, right? I don't want to discredit them, too much, right? With Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett, obviously, and those guys. Greg Newsome is a great player. Grant Delpit as well. They're all very good players, so it's still going to be tough, but I feel like they've kind of dropped down a step or two. But on the offensive side of the ball, something to point out, and this will lead me into the matchups, is that their offensive tackle, Jedrick Wills, is not going to be able to play tonight. Their backup tackle, DeJuan Jones, has been ruled out for the season, so it's going to be a third-string tackle on that side to either face Nick Herbig, or unless they do some other things to flip around the line, it's probably going to be a third string against Nick Herbig. So watch out for that matchup, obviously. And Mike Hall, their defensive tackle, and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah are still on the injured reserve. So, like I said, it leads me into the matchups, and one of them is going to be Nick Herbig going up against that backup offensive tackle, right? TJ Watt's going to get chipped. A lot of the attention is going to go to him, as well as, Cam Hayward and things like that. Can Nick Herbig create as big of an impact getting to the quarterback this time instead of, getting to Derrick Henry and forcing a fumble, right? Blowing up the 2-point conversion. All great things, but I feel like in this game, they're going to have to definitely get to Jameis Winston to swing the game their way on the defensive side of the ball. So they're definitely going to be looking at that side to try and gain an advantage there. Also, likewise on the other side of things, Myles Garrett going up against Dan Moore. They've seen each other a bunch of times. Myles Garrett has had his success. Dan Moore, surprisingly, has played pretty well, considering that is Myles Garrett on the other side. They're not always going to double team him. They're not always going to chip him. They're going to do it as much as they can, but a lot of the times it's going to be one-on-one. So how often can not only Dan Moore block Myles Garrett, but how quickly can Russ get it out of his hands? Because it's not like he's just going to take off and run. So that's going to be huge as well. And then another matchup I'm interested in is going to be Denzel Ward against George Pickens. There is a bit of a height difference there, so there's that. But Denzel Ward, is a very good player. He's a very good corner. I think he was voted number 2 or number 1 this year for that ESPN, poll that we did and talked about, I think, over the offseason. He was very highly rated, and he's not really mentioned too much, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It just means no one's really throwing to him. So that matchup is going to be huge if Denzel follows him or if he, kind of passes him off to Greg Newsome. Will be interesting to follow. But overall, with all these bad vibes going to Pittsburgh on how it's a trap game, they don't really perform well on Thursday Night Football. I think I'm going to lean on the side that the Steelers are just have enough. And it sounds crazy, like they're not that much better than the Browns, but you never know in these divisional games. But also, I feel like that weather and Jameis Winston, it's not really a good combination. And I've heard a lot of people, more than I expected, talk about Jameis's small hands for how random it sounds, right? You think cold weather, holding on to the ball and everything like that. I feel like that's going to be a little wrinkle in this game where everybody might not know about that, and it could make a big impact. So, and Jameis Winston's not very shy about, thinking about turning the ball over or anything like that. He really doesn't care about that sort of thing. So he's going to be slinging it all over the field, I imagine, even through the bad weather. So I think that's going to be a big point once we look back at this game. If he's able to limit the turnovers and limit the the risky plays, then it could swing in the Browns' favor. But I think the Steelers should have enough. They should score. I would say I'm expecting 2 touchdowns from them today. So I'm going to say that the Steelers win today 25. They'll win 25-13, I'll say. 25-13 is my final prediction. That game is set to kick off in about an hour and a half from now, so we still have a bit to go. But in the meantime, during that time, we're going to move on to our weekly game picks. We are in Week 12 of the NFL season. We're going to go through 6 games that we have in store today, and we're going to break it down, analyze them, and just give our picks as we usually do. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.